Hello, and welcome to the Weaktry Online Academy. My name is Chris, I'll be your tutor for today. We're looking at the Cambridge IGCSE paper 4.1, winter 2019, and we're looking today at question number 2. Question 2, phloem is used to transport sucrose and amino acids in plants. Sucrose is a carbohydrate. Describe the uses of carbohydrates and amino acids in plants. All right, so let's have a look first at carbohydrates. So the main function of carbohydrates in organisms is to release energy from aerobic respiration, okay, to release energy, yeah? Now, other parts of the plant that contain starch include the cellulose cell wall. So it could be used to make cellulose cell walls, okay, so it can make cellulose cell walls. It can also be used to make starch, which is the storage molecule in plants. It can also be used to make sugars, such as the nectaries or fruits, the sweet sugars that draw plants during pollination. So you could say for nectaries, okay. So these are all individual marking points. So any two of those would have given you 2 maximum marks. If you wrote all 4, you still would only get 2 marks. You would need to talk about amino acids as well, okay. So amino acids are very important. Amino acids are used to make protein. So they make protein for growth. Okay, so they make protein for growth. Okay, okay, okay. You could also use proteins. Think of proteins in the organism. So in plants and most living things, enzymes are made of proteins. Yeah, so to make enzymes. You could also look at making hormones such as auxin, e.g. auxin, that is also a protein, okay? Now, if you wrote 2 of those and 2 of these, you would get your maximum 4 marks here. So remember, both carbohydrates and amino acids is needed for full marks. Question B. Quite a few people would miss this question out because there's no written space in the question itself. But if you can clearly see here, there's 3 marks available here for a simple labeling the picture. All right. Now, if you remember in the leaf, the phloem is at the lower part of the leaf, and the xylem is on the top. In the stem, the phloem is also on the outer region as well, facing outwards in labeling it P. Okay, and in regards to the root, again, the phloem is on the outside, the smaller section compared to the xylem, which is the inner section. Now, this would be an easy 3 marks if you know your structure of the leaf, stem, and root in a transverse cross-section diagram. Your label lines should be just straight lines using a ruler with the label P. It clearly says and letter label P. So don't shade, don't circle, has to be a label line with the letter P. Question C. Now, aphids are used by investigators to discover how plants transport sucrose. Okay, here the aphid enters its mouth into the stem to feed off the liquid from the phloem. This experiment here was carried out in a dark cupboard with aphids A, B, C, and D. Okay, here's your location of those aphids, and it's in a dark cupboard. This is important for this part of the question. Immediately after the aphids were placed on the plant, it was observed that all aphids ingested the same volume of liquid from the phloem. However, aphid D ingested the highest concentration. Explain why aphid D ingested the highest concentration of sucrose. Well, in this case, it's in the dark, so there's no photosynthesis. And if there's no photosynthesis, then there's no glucose being made at the leaves. Okay, so there's no glucose, which in turn means there's no sucrose being made at the leaves. That is important. Okay, and this means that what happens is that the tuber, or should we say the tuber or the root, okay, the root in this case is acting as a source, yeah, a source of sucrose. And here you would have the starch, okay, the starch in the root is converted eventually into sucrose. So it'd go into glucose and then into sucrose. And then this would be translocated, okay, translocated up the stem, okay, to the leaves or leaf, yeah, to the leaf. Now, as a result, okay, now in this context, the leaf is now being the sink, okay, where that sucrose is going to then be metabolized and used for respiration as glucose. Now, because of that, if you look where aphid D is, aphid D is closer to the root. So aphid D is, on the stem, close to root, which is the source. Yeah, close to root. Okay, now with that in mind, there is 9 potential marks here, but you only need to say 3 ones or 3 valid ones here. So it's a fairly straightforward process. If your normal knowledge applies, you would have thought that the aphid A, B, and C would have had the highest because that's where the leaves are and that's where photosynthesis would be, and the leaf is normally the source in most examples. But you had to really read the question to understand this one. Okay, so hopefully that all makes sense. Question 2i. Many crop farmers try to prevent insects such as aphids from damaging their plants. Describe how modern technology is used to reduce the damage to plants by insects. Now, one might think it's, you could say, a biological control here, but it's talking about modern technology. We're not talking about strategies, okay? If it was talking about strategies, you could use a biological control here, but this is not what the question is asking. And normally that would be a question associated to reduce environmental impact. So generally, modern technology refers to the idea of genetic modification. Okay, so you could genetically modify crops. Okay, and you can genetically modify them to produce a natural insecticide. Okay, so to produce natural insecticide. Yeah, and as a result, what would happen is the aphid would try and eat the plant, and they'd consume this insecticide, and it would die. Okay, now as a result, this obviously reduces the impact on the environment because you aren't spraying chemicals all the time. But again, that's side information. You don't need to go there for this question. The other part to think about as well is that rather than having our crops out in the open, we have greenhouses. We could have other external barriers to prevent aphids getting to our crops. So you could say here, use of greenhouses, you could say, and nets, okay, to stop insects. Okay. Now it said about technology. Okay, so here you aren't going to have your, let's say the biological control is not a form of technology. Okay, so we're talking about something that's man-made or man-done. All right. Okay. Question 3i. Other insects are useful to crop farmers. Give one example of how insects can be useful to farmers. So there's 2 things here. You could say what we mentioned in the first one, the idea of a biological control. Something like a ladybird could be used as a natural or biological control to consume aphids. So you could say here, you could use as a biological control, to eat pests. Okay, you could also mention example, e.g. like a ladybird. Okay, again, that's specific for aphids. But also remember, insects play a very important role in our crop industry. They are the pollinators, so they can act as pollinators. Okay, our pollinators. Okay, and this would therefore produce more genetically varied seeds, and that could also therefore be a beneficial thing to farmers as well. Okay. Thank you for watching our video. Please register on the website for a free demo, and I look forward to seeing you in our next video.